The Afternoons with Joy podcast is presented by United Faith Mortgage. Let their direct lender advantage save you time and money.
Hey friend, thank you for joining me for a very special episode of the Afternoons with Joy podcast. These episodes about postpartum depression are so close to my heart and so close to the vest. And I'm going to share things that are hard for me to talk about, but I think they're important to have conversations around. And so when I first opened up at the beginning of the year about walking through postpartum depression, I knew that at some point I wanted to talk to an expert, because you might be listening to this and you want answers to your questions, and I only have my own experience to share with you, and that's not going to answer maybe some of those important questions that you have. So I found an amazing expert out of Georgia named Kristen Mize, and I got to do a Zoom interview with her. I actually sat in on a conversation she was having online to encourage moms, and she started talking about postpartum anxiety and depression, and I was like, that is me. And when you hear someone describing something that is not often talked about and it fits you, there's just this like weight that comes off your shoulders and you don't feel crazy. And so I knew that I wanted to talk to Kristen because her words might encourage you as much as they encouraged me. So I want you to know that in this conversation, we're going to touch on a few things, like how to know if you might be dealing with postpartum depression or anxiety, resources if you think you are, and how to respond during what should be the happiest time of your life when that's not how you feel. One of the most important parts is in the middle, we talk about advice for you if you're listening to this and you just have someone you love who is walking through postpartum depression and you want to know how to be there for them. We speak to that, as well as at the very end of the podcast, we talk about why parenting is different now than it was when we were being raised, and how putting focus on the mom right after a baby is born is so crucial, not just for you if you're delivering or just had a kid, but for those around you to know that they really need to check in with how you are doing. So here is my conversation with the very gifted Kristen Mize. I am here today with Kristen Mize. She is a licensed clinical social worker. And Kristen, you specialize in maternal mental health, which I need someone like Kristen in my life, because I've been really honest about my story of postpartum depression. And so I wanted to talk to a professional because so many women deal with this, and mine is just one unique story. So I wanted to know from you, what made you passionate about going into maternal mental health?
Well, thank you for having me, by the way. I'm always honored and excited to bring more awareness to this area for women who might be mothers now, who are trying to become mothers, and who have walked through this pain or this journey previously. So thank you for that. Mm-hmm. And yes, so my passion and my purpose really lies in spreading awareness about perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. It happens to 1 in 5 women.
One in 5?
I never say 1 in 5. So anytime you're out, let's say with girls' night or girls' dinner, or you're, at church or in a grocery store, and you look around, 1 in 5 women. And so you could be standing next to someone who's gone through it, who is afraid to say something, or just felt too ashamed, right? And so
there's a lot of shame, I think, because you're supposed to be the happiest you've ever been in your life. So when you don't have that, you think, well, I better not let anybody know.
Exactly. And especially too, because on the flip side, we have so much more awareness and so many more open struggles with infertility, I think, nowadays. So you feel, or the tendency might be to feel, well, I should just feel fortunate that I'm even able to be pregnant and have children. I kind of went through both, which kind of helped open my eyes to this field. My husband and I struggled with fertility. So we went through treatments and everything, and we were very blessed to be able to get pregnant twice. And it was in my second pregnancy with twins that I was hit around 20 weeks in with perinatal depression. So quickly, so we used to refer to it as postpartum
Yeah.
So it's now referred to as perinatal mood and anxiety disorders because now we know it can happen during pregnancy and postpartum.
Wow.
It's not just depression. I'll talk about that in a little bit. I
Mhm.
am seeing more women with postpartum anxiety.
Yeah, and I don't even know what
Than
that is, so I'm glad you're bringing that up.
Mhm. And even postpartum OCD. And so
Wow.
perinatal covers the whole phase of preconception through postpartum. And the important thing too to remember is if you are 6 months to a year, even 2 years in after having a baby, and you still don't feel like yourself, you are still considered postpartum. A
You
lot of
are
women,
2
yeah,
years, Kristen?
yeah. Because then, I think anybody, I'm 9 years postpartum, right? I mean, so I think anyone who has had a baby and who struggles, your body goes through something absolutely wonderful but insane. And
It
so
really
it
is.
can be a trigger for a host of things to get in motion, including hormones, and now having these tiny humans to raise and to love and to
Yes.
care for. So, um, anyhow, it can cover that whole phase. And so
Yeah.
I say that because a lot of women also won't reach out, let's say after their 6 week checkup, because they think, oh, I should be fine. This isn't postpartum anymore.
Yeah, it's
You
something else that has nothing to do with my baby. Like, I just
Right.
asked one of my girlfriends because I had a lot of, like, postpartum hair loss, and I said, "Girl, when's my hair gonna be normal again?" And she said, "It's probably never gonna be normal again."
Right.
I was like, "Don't tell me that." But,
I
your body does go through so many changes that it literally could take years for you to understand, like, where we are now, you know what I mean? So, can you explain what the difference is between postpartum anxiety and depression? I really would love to know how to identify.
So postpartum depression, you're more tearful, sad, perhaps sometimes muted or sort of numb. Some women describe
Mm,
that's when you have or hear about difficulty bonding with baby or
yeah.
not wanting to be around baby because
Mhm,
it just brings up too much pain.
mhm.
It's sometimes irritability. That's what a lot goes unrecognized. Is it may come off as being really nasty to your partner, or
I experienced all of those things. Thank God for my husband. He's been very patient.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And so again, it's more of the sadness, sometimes feelings of despair. Sometimes you may have thoughts of, I shouldn't have done this. We shouldn't be parents,
Mm,
regret.
mhm,
Um, and it can be changes in appetite.
mhm.
Sleep, of course, is hard. You're losing sleep as it is, but if you
Yeah.
are wanting to sleep and you're essentially doing so despite needing to take care of a baby, that can be a sign.
Mhm.
And so, of course, right, normal fatigue, normal worries about baby are very common after having a
Yeah.
baby. But I always say, so there's baby blues, which is 2 weeks postpartum,
Okay.
roughly. If it lasts more than 2 to 3 weeks and you're still having more bad days than good,
Okay.
that's when I suggest reaching out to number one, you can start with your OB unless you are already established with perhaps a counselor
Mhm.
or whomever you feel closest to. Oftentimes it ends up being our OB, or if you feel closer to the baby's pediatrician.
Yeah. As early as 3 weeks, that's kind of shocking to me. I just figured it
Yeah.
was just rough for, like, a long time. I had a
Yeah.
rough experience in the beginning, but I didn't
Yeah. And
know.
and and interesting you say that too, because I think so many women, I'll say, suffer in silence because sometimes the message that we've been given is this is just motherhood.
It's just
you
hard.
know Motherhood is hard, motherhood is exhausting, and so what does that tell you? I just need to be tough, I just need to tough this out, and
Yeah.
and so that can be damaging, right? So it
Mhm.
prevents us from getting help. And I will say, certainly don't hesitate if it's 6 months out, 8 months out, to
Yeah.
ask for help. But I'm actually appreciating, I'm getting more and more women to reach out 2 and 3 weeks postpartum
Wow.
who just don't feel themselves, and I applaud that.
Yeah.
So that's baby blues versus depression. I say if it's gone on 2 to 3 weeks and you're still not having relief from, let's say, the tearfulness, sadness, um, just feelings of or apathy, right?
Mm.
Maybe reach out to somebody, right?
Okay.
Because what we know, based on research, clinical research, is if mom's not okay, baby's not going to be okay.
Yeah,
So we
that's so
have to get mom
important.
okay.
And that's what's hard is we also hear these messages of being a sacrificial mother, woman. And really, you don't have any time to think about yourself in the first few weeks. It's kind of like, oh, did I eat? Did I like feed myself? Because you're so focused on taking care of someone new. So the idea, I will get into that later, but having people in your life who will check in on you and ask questions, like we can be those people for others. But what does it look like when you're dealing with the anxiety portion?
So, and I think this is more rapidly onset. I can say, in postpartum anxiety, and you can have this during pregnancy too. Perhaps you're more at risk if you have a high risk pregnancy, or if you've had a history of generalized anxiety even before pregnancy, right? And so it's this generalized worry and angst, and it can be just the constant racing thoughts cycling through your brain. What about this? What if this happens? So you're thinking of the what if thoughts. You're thinking, am I a good enough mother? Did she get enough milk? A lot of times if women have a hard time breastfeeding, it's worrying about if their baby will be okay. And so I always say, if you have the opportunity, this is a usual litmus test for someone who might be having postpartum anxiety. If I were to give you an hour of, I will take care of the baby 2 hours, and you go and take a nap, you lay down, could your brain turn off and you go to sleep? No. Right. So
no, girl. Right. You'd be so tired, you would think so, but it's hard to turn your brain off.
So, but if the list keeps running through, and they can be worried, there's, anxiety about baby's health, your family's health. Now that we have this, person to love and protect, the stakes feel that much higher. And so it can run the gamut of things that you're worrying about. But that's kind of when I say, okay, if you can't turn it off for you to get necessary sleep, and also what's accompanied with that is physical sensations of anxiety, tightness in your chest, rapid heartbeat, tenseness in your shoulders, stomach aches. A lot of times in women and mothers, our arms feel numb sometimes. I don't know if it's holding a baby all the time, but you can even have numbness and tingling as physical manifestations of anxiety. And
it is so hard to identify this because your body's healing from birth. And so I felt terrible for like a week, but it was probably a mix of all these things. I'd never had a baby before. I said, I guess you just feel terrible after you have a baby. But I think some of it was the symptoms you're talking about.
Right. And so, and again, that may subside over time, but if it does not, and you are losing sleep, because what we know is lack of sleep and fatigue and lack of things like good nutrition for us can increase or exacerbate symptoms of anxiety or depression. And so, of course we want to sleep, but we can't. And that just can make it feel that much worse.
Yeah. And there's so much shame that I feel like is associated, even though we try to normalize it. We try to have conversations like this. And even as someone who had dealt with some depression and anxiety prior to becoming a mom, I still did not want the label. I thought, I want to, in my own mind, like beat this. I don't want to deal with it because there's a lot that comes along with it. And I don't want to be the mom who had postpartum depression. And I was just like afraid of it. And so I think I fought getting help maybe longer than I should have. And so what would you say to a mom who feels that way, or to like previous me, if you could talk to me before I sought help?
Sure. It is so, I would say, what advice would you give your best friend, right? If you knew your best friend was struggling in the way that you were feeling, what would you tell, presumably her, or what would you tell a future daughter of yours if you saw this person that you love so much hurting and struggling? And I will definitely say, I too kind of fought, again, and I'm a therapist, I should know this stuff, but I was like, I should know how to get out of this, right? But I always say, it can always get better, and you are not alone. You're not alone. That's the thing. As I said, 1 in 5 have a diagnosable postpartum mood disorder, but yet that's all we know about. Those aren't the people that aren't coming up and saying, hey, I'm struggling.
And so many go undiagnosed. Let's take on the role of a friend and maybe like a sister and someone has had a baby. That's all you know is they've had a baby. Yep. What are good questions to ask, and what's a non-offensive way to check on people? Because if it wasn't for some girlfriends asking some hard questions, I think it would have taken me longer to seek help.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that because I just had a client who just had her second baby. And first thing, she held the baby. We were doing a Zoom session and I went straight to her. I mean, the baby was beautiful, adorable, but I said, how are you? Mm-hmm. How are you? Mm-hmm. Are you getting sleep when you can? Mm-hmm. And question. I do ask, and this is me personally, but also professionally, how is feeding going? Because one of the biggest triggers that I see for shame and depression and anxiety is difficulty or even inability to breastfeed.
Yeah, that was my story.
Right. And so, I always say fed is best and we need you to be okay. Yeah. Right. And if you're not okay during these feedings, then baby's not going to be okay. Mm-hmm. Right. And so I really just hone right in, how are you doing? And not just here's something else that's really important. I think it's so easy to say, well, oh my God, baby's so cute. If you ever want me to come over and hold her, I will. 9 times out of 10, that friend isn't going to say, hey, can you come over and hold this baby so I can sleep? Yeah. Right. I just we have a hard time asking for help. Yeah. As women, culturally speaking here. And so, so I like to say, what can I do to help you? Can I bring you a meal? Ask more specific, do you want me to throw in a load of laundry before I leave? Mm-hmm. Do you want me to set up a meal train? Honestly, because what person would do that I think it would take a lot. And I applaud the person who would, but I would think it'd be very hard for, let's say I'm about to have a baby, for me to say, I'm going to set up my own meal train. We just don't tend to do that. Right. But we need to eat. Yes.
And that's the last thing on your mind in those first few weeks, girl.
Or, what can I order from Uber Eats and have it sent to you? Like kind of be more specific. Yeah. And I think, when can I call you where you have a second where I can check in on you? Yes. Instead of call me if you need anything, we mean well, but exactly. Knowing that women have the hardest time, especially in the most vulnerable time after having a baby, it's very difficult and unlikely that someone's going to say, hey, I need something.
Absolutely. So that's so good. Take care of their physical and then check in on their mental. That's so helpful. Just taking a quick break from our conversation with Kristen Mize to tell you about our incredible podcast sponsors. They're really the only reason we get to bring you content like this. If you're anything like me, you are often thinking about food, or at least what your next meal is going to be. And there are people around the globe the exact same way, except it's because they don't know where their next meal is coming from. That's where Food for the Hungry steps in. They're a Christian humanitarian organization, and they're a podcast sponsor. I'm so proud of the work they're doing to end forms of human poverty. In fact, they just took care of a widow named Rose who lives in Rwanda with a bunch of kids. And she said not only were the kids malnourished and hungry, but so were the adults in the family. After her husband died, she just couldn't take care of the farm, and they didn't have enough food to go around. But now that her child has a sponsor who gives $38 a month through their child sponsorship program, the family's not going hungry anymore. I mean, not just the child you choose to sponsor is impacted, their entire family is. They're able to get food, education, clean water, medical treatment, stuff that's a no-brainer here, but there are kids around the globe that don't even have that chance. So if your heart is even a little bit intrigued, will you go to fh.org/joy and just look at the kids waiting for a sponsor right now, or click that link in our bio and you could be the hero for a kid who's hungry today. I don't know if you saw the news story of a father and son who became heroes while deep sea fishing. They almost got hit by another boat and then noticed no one was driving it. So they caught up to it. The son jumps aboard this runaway boat and gets control of it. Then they go back and rescue the guy who got thrown from the boat in the first place, who'd been treading water for 3 hours. They saved someone's life. So you can do anything with family that you trust. And that's why we trust United Faith Mortgage. They're a father-son team, and John and Ryan are going to work hard to get you the most money possible. See, United Faith Mortgage has this direct lender advantage, which means that there's no middleman, and that can actually save you lifelong money. So just go to UnitedFaithMortgage.com and you'll be treated just like family.
United Faith Mortgage is a DBA of United Mortgage Corp. 25 Melville Park Road, Melville, New York. Licensed mortgage banker. For all licensing information, go to NMLSConsumerAccess.org. Corporate NMLS number 1330. Equal housing lender. Licensed in Alaska, Hawaii, Georgia, Massachusetts, North Dakota, South Dakota, or Utah.
So when someone does decide to seek help, like, what would you say does the healing process look like for a lot of women? I know it's unique, but what can someone expect if they decide to seek help? And what does seeking help look like? We kind of started to talk about that.
Sure. So I think, right, whoever, you are in most or closest contact with, from the medical perspective, if you don't already have somebody for your mental health, I would say start there. You do fill out the form at your 6-week checkup.
Yeah.
I hear oftentimes that doctors are just kind of, they're not as intentional with that scale for postpartum depression or anxiety. And so and you could feel really not so great before that 6-week checkup, and you don't have to wait until then.
Yeah,
right?
I waited, and I was grateful my doctor got the ball rolling on helping me.
I know, right? And I sought support from my high risk, my perinatologist, and she was a godsend. And so they oftentimes will have resources that you can either contact in your community, either for counseling, sometimes psychiatric, for medication. Now, an asterisk on medication, or just it's a moment on education. Some doctors will just say, let me give you some Zoloft, that'll take care of it. And that's not what everybody's looking for right away. That can be helpful because we are biochemically talking about a change in our brains, right? Yeah, if we do suffer from true anxiety, depression, or OCD. However, some people do not want that to be their first line of defense. And so counseling, working with a therapist, what the healing process looks like, I think first and foremost is just, acknowledging and accepting that we're not okay. And that's okay.
That's the hardest part. That's the biggest hump to get over, I would say.
And sort of and reducing the shame, I think, that is so embedded in this. And the way to do that is through so much self-compassion, work on self-compassion. And also, so there's different techniques. I use cognitive behavioral therapy, which works on our thoughts.
Yeah.
Helps us reframe our thoughts. And I do a lot of mindfulness work too with my clients. So trying to be present and calm in the moment.
Yes.
Because so much about depression or anxiety is about racing forward and trying to predict and plan and control the future.
You're not in the moment. You're like 5 minutes ahead, 5 days ahead. Yeah.
Sorry. And it just doesn't feel, I'm sorry, she's my guard dog. It just doesn't feel, and then, months go by and we're like, what just happened? Because we're disconnected.
Yes.
And so, it's just, I think the biggest thing is to be kind to yourself. Give yourself so much grace. And I always say, what would you say to your best friend? Because you wouldn't talk to your best friend the way you're talking to yourself.
No,
I imagine.
You wouldn't keep your friends. That's for sure.
Right. So, and time varies for every I have clients who I see for 2 months. I have clients who I see for months to years, but that's, it all depends, and it's individually, it's all individual.
Yeah, because it's been a year and I'm still seeing my counselor and still working on, because some of it's patterns that you're trying to change a pattern in your mind. And so as we're closing up, I wanted to ask you, what are some thought patterns to be aware of and look out for that, like when you maybe hear this line or this line of thinking, that some red alerts would go off in our brains and go, this isn't healthy. I need to do something about this.
So I will say, certainly, and this may be a trigger warning, but certainly if you are having thoughts that you would rather not be here, that is definitely do not pass go. Call your doctor, tell someone you know and trust. Okay. Yeah. Oftentimes they're just thoughts because it feels so desperate what we're feeling.
And it doesn't
necessarily, Right. And it doesn't necessarily mean that, it's understood that you want to act on those thoughts, but that tells me you're in a really bad place and you deserve help. Right.
Absolutely.
And it's available. And sometimes that comes with depression, and even anxiety because it's so exhausting. Right. Sometimes our worries are so much that we often think that people might be better without us because we're just so caught in our own head. So those are certainly two, that I would say you must let somebody know there is help for you.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
More common thought patterns that I see in women with postpartum is, or perinatal depression or anxiety, is a lot of perfectionism. So if things aren't perfect or feel perfect or
Oops,
feel
got me.
totally, it's like 98% of my practice, or feel like you're in control of everything, then you feel discomfort. You feel out of control. Sometimes your brain spirals, so that's one pretty, I would say an alert, because it's like, if you can't adapt or have trouble adapting to when things don't feel in control, once we have babies, I mean, I don't know what does anymore,
That's what I'm learning, is they're like out of control.
Yeah, if you've gone 30 years feeling like, if I just do A, B, C, and D, I'll feel better, but now we can't anymore. Your brain is primed to must do A, B, C, and D before we can calm down.
Right? And a lot of that doesn't work with a baby. It just doesn't.
Exactly. I do, obviously, if you have, some anxiety about health of either yourself or the baby, so much so that you're either not going anywhere or you don't want anyone else to take care of the baby. Some of that is normal, of course, but again, remembering we need mom to be okay. So if you're not leaving the house and sitting in darkness because you don't want to wake the baby up, or you just, we need you to be okay too.
Yes.
Right. So I guess looking for flexibility around those concerns is going to be key. And if you just don't feel like you can get yourself to allow, let's say, someone else to take over baby's care, let's talk about that. Right.
Yeah.
Let's work on that.
That's so helpful. Those are great warning signs. Yeah. Those are things that even if we hear someone say this to us, or you check on a friend and she says, doing well, I just can't let anybody else take care of the baby. Like that's even a warning sign to engage deeper in conversation, because they might need a little help.
Even just a friend. And I know with COVID, that's been a little tricky, of course, but those are two of the most common, either perfectionism, wanting control, or just, wanting to do everything because of fear that someone else may not do it the right way, or,
So, girl, been reading my diary, Kristen, and I don't like it.
Like I could say, I could write a textbook, because
we're
all, just to help you feel even just more normalized, this is what I hear day in and day out from clients in my office. And I know I say, I'm pulling from the book of life here, not from, yes, I have training and everything, but, it's because, I'm right in the trenches with y'all. So
yes. And it's such an encouragement, I think, that when God blesses us with children, no matter how hard of a transition that it is, and it bucks up against these things in us, it's like, it's a time to change. It's an opportunity to do things in a new way that's going to be better for us and for our baby. And so that's the positive side I'm seeing from this, from seeking help, is I now have even more motivation to put my perfectionism to bed. You know what I mean? And to battle my anxiety, because I got to do it for this little man of mine,
And I applaud that for you too. And I do. I really think it can be God tugging us in ways, or I call it sometimes God winks. Like, this is a God wink. Like, this is your time to grow, and whether we do it now, or I think, and I applaud you because, and this is what happens so much with my clients as well. We want to break generational cycles, whereas we may have seen our parents do things a certain way that didn't feel great. We're not necessarily wanting that to be the way we parent or feel. Like you said, the mom that does it all and the kids are first. We're learning mom needs to be first.
Yes. Which
is a very hard concept to grasp with, I think, what we saw our parents do.
As we were first.
Particularly our mothers, from our generation, generally speaking.
Yes, that's so true. And so as we're talking about help, as we're closing, can you just share how someone could get in contact with you, or what are some great resources if you're listening to this or watching this and you're thinking, yeah, maybe I do want to talk to somebody, or yeah, my girlfriend I think is going through that. Where do we point them?
Absolutely. So I think the number one resource that I would share is Postpartum Support International, so PSI. And if you go on their website, if you just put in Postpartum Support International, they have you can search for providers. They have information on the different perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, but then you can search by zip code of where you live. So let's say you're in Tennessee, you put that in and it'll populate the therapists in your area that are registered with them. So they specialize in this area. We have special training.
So important.
Exactly. Right. I can't tell you the stories I've heard of people who kind of weren't familiar and they were treating a mom. It just didn't go well. So that would be the number one resource, because it also says, how to talk to your partner. There's so much information there for pregnancy, postpartum, miscarriage, loss, all the things. So Postpartum Support International. I don't know if Tennessee has their own chapter. I know we do in Georgia. So then we make it a little bit more tailored to Georgia. And then the Postpartum is also on Facebook and Instagram. And then my personal website, I'm at KristinMize.com, and it's KristinMizeLCSW.com. I also have a page of other resources. So there's other links that they can click on too. So, but that has all the information about my services. I speak to groups as well. I do public speaking, conferences.
That's how I found Kristen. I was listening with a group of moms and I was like, I need this. My friends need this.
I love it. I'm so glad. And this is why I do it, because if one person from one group can hear, et cetera, then the word gets out faster. So, and then on Instagram, I provide, helpful hints, resources, but also real life mom stuff. I'm at Good Vibe Mom Tribe on Instagram. So that's Vibe
Mom Tribe. I love that.
Because, it's not toxically positive, but I want to send out good vibes. But, I'm very into, your vibe attracts your tribe. And in motherhood, we just need that support. We need positivity. We need real, and that's kind of what I aim to put out there on that account. So.
We need that, Kristen. Thank you for joining us for this time and sharing with us so we can get real about our struggles and hopefully help ourselves and help each other. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.